My name is Sylvia Carter. I am 62, a retired elementary school teacher who took night shifts as a waitress after my husband died. I know the weight of a coupon book and the taste of canned soup. I also know how to make a home out of very little. I paid for my daughter's wedding because I believed in the promise of family. At my daughter's wedding, her groom yelled at me, "You don't belong here, leave now." Within the next hour, I canceled every wedding payment, and the surprise I revealed afterward left him speechless. The band stopped mid-chord. Glasses paused at open mouths. Even the chandelier seemed to hold its breath. Ethan stood beneath it with his jaw set. He gripped my daughter's wrist as if ownership came with a ring. Lydia's veil shook against her collarbone. Her eyes slipped past mine toward the exit she hoped I would choose. The room smelled like peonies and butter. That is the scent of money I saved for years with hands cracked by dishwater and chalk dust. I did not argue. I did not plead. Widowhood once taught me to swallow and smile. I let that instruction drift to the floor. I lifted my purse. I turned. I walked. At the door, a young server brushed my elbow and whispered, "You did nothing wrong." She looked 18. Her kindness landed like a hand between my shoulder blades. The doors closed behind me with a hush that felt like snowfall inside a church. In the parking lot, the sun made the windshields shine like mirrors. I saw a woman who remembered every bill she had paid. I opened my binder of invoices. Every tab carried my name: venue, florist, caterer, band, photographer. The first call lasted 15 seconds. "This is Sylvia Carter. I am the contract holder. Cancel the event." The second took less. By the third, my breath had leveled into the calm of someone who has finally stopped apologizing. My phone began to hum with messages from my sister, Marjorie. "Sylvia, do not make a scene. Do not ruin the day." From acquaintances. "Where did you go? Are you okay?" Not one asked what had been done to me. I closed the messages and called the bank. I asked them to freeze the card that had quietly paid for embossed menus and sugar flowers. The clerk read back recent charges. I confirmed each one. Then I requested written confirmation and an alert for any further attempt. Vendors answered with different flavors of surprise. The florist was gentle. The band was worried. The venue manager allowed a silence long enough to count 3 peony petals on the carpet. "There will be a cancellation fee," he said. "No," I answered. "There will be a cancellation recorded under my signature." Paper rustled. Keys clicked. The calendar cleared. I watched a gull curve through the late light and felt a small, clean space open in my chest. When the hour was nearly done, I walked back to the foyer. My heels ticked against marble like a metronome. Ethan stood there, flushed, whispering into his phone. Lydia hovered behind him with a bouquet that had begun to sag. He looked at me as if expecting a plea. I handed him a neat stack of papers: cancellation emails, confirmation numbers, a notice that the credit line funding their honeymoon had been frozen pending review, and one simple letter with a single sentence at its center: "If I am not welcome, neither is my money." Ethan tried to laugh. His mouth forgot how. He scanned the pages. His eyes stuttered. The color drained from his cheeks like a receding tide. "You cannot do this," he said. "It is our day." "It was my gift," I said. "Gifts can be withdrawn when the giver is told to leave the room." I kept my voice low. I kept my spine tall. The young server stood still near the coat rack. Her stillness steadied me more than any speech. Lydia lifted her hand. For 1 second, I believed she would touch me. Ethan caught her fingers and folded them down. One petal slipped from her bouquet and landed on the marble with a soft breath. I looked at my daughter and saw the child who once slept with her hand in mine during thunderstorms. I also saw a woman who could not yet find her courage. I decided not to carry it for her. I stepped aside. I let the silence speak. Before I left, I placed one more envelope on the check-in table. This was the surprise I had not planned to use. Years ago, my husband's union created a scholarship in his name for students who work nights to help their families. I had arranged in the fine print of the reception agreement that if I canceled under my authority, the deposit would be redirected to that fund. The envelope held the confirmation and a small photograph of my husband holding our baby girl in a thrift store kitchen. Lydia once taped a copy of that picture to our refrigerator. I kept the original tucked in my wallet. I stepped into the evening air. My phone buzzed again. I let it. Behind me, the room began to move in confused circles. Rumors would bloom, judgments would gather, heads would tilt. Let them. I had remembered who I was. I am the woman who teaches by breaking hard things into parts. The woman who learned to reseal a leaking pipe. The woman who knows that love without respect is a debt that never stops compounding. If any of this feels familiar to you, stay with me. At the end, I will ask where you would draw your line. I stood in the parking lot, the muffled echo of music seeping through the ballroom walls, each note slicing against my skin like glass. The evening air was sharp, the kind that bites the lungs when you are already gasping. My hands trembled so badly that I clutched my old expense ledger to my chest, pressing it tight as if the leather-bound book might steady my shaking bones. That ledger was more than paper. It was the record of every sacrifice I had made, every skip dinner out, every winter without a new coat. It smelled faintly of ink and dust. It carried the weight of years when my entire life could be reduced to columns, of numbers, and the hope that tomorrow I might balance them better. I lowered myself onto the curb beside a parked car. The gravel pressed against my heels. I stared at my reflection in the car door. A woman with lined cheeks, hair pulled into a careful bun, lipstick faded around the edges. A woman who had once been told she was the heart of her family, now told she did not belong at her own daughter's wedding. The tremor in my hands worsened, so I opened the ledger and let the columns of handwriting anchor me. The caterer's bill, the florist, the rental hall. My name at the bottom of each contract, bold, decisive, every dollar a story, every signature a vow that my daughter's day would be perfect. And then, through the blur of tears, memory came rushing in. Lydia at 16 standing in our kitchen, light from the window catching on her hair. She had just received her acceptance letter to college. She hugged me and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mom. I promise you'll never regret all you've done for me." Her voice back then was filled with a conviction that felt like sunrise. I had believed her. I had lived on that promise for years, repeating it to myself while I counted tips at midnight, while I graded papers alone in a silent classroom. "I'll make you proud, Mom." Now, in the parking lot, the echo of that vow scraped against the silence inside me. Proud. Was this what pride felt like? Being asked to leave like an unwanted guest? I pressed the ledger tighter. The paper edges dug into my palm, leaving faint marks like scars of ink. My phone buzzed in my purse, insistent, relentless. I pulled it out with unsteady fingers. A new message from my sister, Marjorie, appeared across the cracked screen. "Sylvia, don't make a scene. Don't ruin Lydia's big day." The words stung worse than Ethan's shout. At least Ethan was not bound to me by blood. But Marjorie, who had watched me mend Lydia's dresses, who had borrowed money when her own rent was due, she told me to keep quiet, to disappear politely for the sake of appearances. I read the text twice, then a third time, until the letters blurred into a haze. Don't make a scene. What did they think this was? I had not raised my voice. I had not argued. I had simply existed in the wrong place, at the wrong time, according to a man who believed I was not worth the space I occupied. And now my own sister echoed his verdict. Fade out, Sylvia. Be invisible. Let them step over your bones and call it celebration. A sob clawed its way up my throat, but I swallowed it whole. Crying would not serve me. I let silence fill me instead, silence as cold and steady as the night air pressing on my shoulders. I remembered the years of living small, quiet meals alone after Robert died, quiet holidays where I wrapped gifts bought from clearance bins, quiet nights where my only conversation was with the ledger, always silence, always endurance. But this silence was different. This was not endurance. This was decision. The tremor in my hands began to still. I turned the ledger to a blank page at the back. With the tip of a pen, I drew a single line down the center. On one side, I wrote, "What they want me to do." On the other, "What I must do." Under their column, "Stay quiet, let the payment stand, swallow the humiliation." Under mine, "Cancel everything, claim back my voice, protect the memory of Robert and the value of my labor." The pen dug hard enough into the paper to nearly tear it. My heart steadied with each word. Another buzz from Marjorie's text thread lit the screen. "Sylvia, please, think of Lydia. Don't be selfish." The word selfish landed like a slap. Selfish. After I had emptied savings accounts, after I had postponed retirement, after I had turned down weekends away so every penny could support this day. I whispered aloud, though no one was near enough to hear, "If I had been selfish, this wedding would not exist." My voice quivered, but the truth within it rang clear. I pressed the phone face down on my lap. I stared at the asphalt shimmering beneath the streetlights, at the faint smear of oil stains that reminded me of the kitchen floor after Robert tracked in grease from late shifts. I thought of him, steady, quiet, always reminding me that dignity is not given by others, it is chosen. He once told me, "Sylvia, the world will test how invisible it can make you. Don't let them succeed." I had forgotten that, until now. Slowly I rose from the curb. My knees ached, but I stood taller than I had inside that ballroom. The ledger rested in my arms like armor. My fingers no longer shook. Somewhere behind me, the music picked up again, the rhythm of a party trying to pretend the storm had passed. But I knew the storm had only just begun. And for once, I was not afraid to let it rage. I sat in my car for several long minutes, the engine off, the dashboard clock ticking forward as if daring me to waste more of my life in silence. My expense ledger was still in my lap, and the words I had written, "What they want me to do versus what I must do," burned like a verdict. For 58 years, I had allowed the people I loved to write my story for me. Tonight, for the first time, I would pick up the pen and write my own. My hand steadied as I unlocked my phone. The glow of the screen painted my face in pale light. The first number I dialed was the wedding planner. Her name was Camille, a woman with a polished voice who had always sounded too busy to remember that I was the one paying her invoices. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk, rehearsed. "Sylvia, is everything all right? We're about to move into the next stage of the reception." I swallowed hard, feeling the words gather like a tide rising in my chest. "Camille," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Cancel everything. End the contracts. Tonight." There was a pause, the kind of silence that usually makes a woman like me back down, but I did not. She stammered, I don't understand." "The catering? The venue? The band?" "All of it," I said. "Everything attached to my name and my money. Cancel it. Send confirmation to my email." Another pause, then her professional tone faltered into something more human. "Are you sure, Mrs. Carter? It will cause chaos." "I am sure," I replied. "Chaos already came when Ethan told me I didn't belong." The line went quiet before she murmured, "Understood." I ended the call before doubt could creep in. My chest ached, but beneath the ache was something sturdier, resolve. One by one, I dialed the numbers from my ledger. The florist, whose roses I had smelled only yesterday, the photographer who promised golden light in every shot, the caterer who had rehearsed the menu twice with me. My voice did not tremble as I spoke the same phrase. Cancel the order. End the service. Effective immediately. Some argued, some sighed, some fell into stunned silence, but all agreed when I reminded them whose signature authorized each bill. Mine. Not Ethan's, not Lydia's. Mine. By the time I reached the band, a wave of exhaustion swept over me. The lead musician hesitated, then said quietly, "I saw what happened in there." "You don't have to explain. We'll pack up." His voice carried no judgment, only recognition. I thanked him, though the words felt too small for the gratitude that pulsed inside me. He had seen me. He had seen the truth. That mattered more than any melody they could play tonight. The last call I made was to the catering staff still serving inside. A young server answered, her voice low as if she were shielding the phone against her apron. I explained who I was, what I had decided, and why they needed to close the service. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Ma'am, you're not wrong. You don't deserve this." Those words pierced deeper than Ethan's insult because they came from a stranger, someone with no stake in my pain. That young woman, carrying trays of champagne flutes, had seen enough to name the truth. "You're not wrong." I closed my eyes and let the words settle in my chest like a seed taking root. For the first time that evening, I felt something close to peace. When I hung up, the parking lot seemed quieter, as if even the night was pausing to witness what I had done. My phone battery blinked red, nearly empty, but I felt fuller than I had in years. The ledger on the seat beside me looked different now, not a list of debts or sacrifices, but a record of my power. Every number in it was mine. Every decision written there belonged to me. I leaned back against the headrest and drew in a long, steady breath. Inside the hall, music still played, glasses still clinked. They would not know yet what was unraveling, how the foundations beneath their celebration had already been pulled away. That was not my concern anymore. My concern was the woman in the car mirror. Weary, yes, scarred, certainly, but no longer invisible. The tremor that had shaken me earlier was gone. In its place was a stillness, a clarity that felt almost holy. Tonight I had been told to leave, to erase myself. Instead, I had drawn the boldest line of my life, and though it cost me every dollar, every ounce of effort, I knew this truth with certainty. Dignity is worth more than any banquet, any bouquet, any photograph. I whispered into the quiet as if Robert could hear me from wherever he rested. I did not disappear. The words hung in the night air, not angry, not bitter, just true. And truth, I realized, was the only gift worth carrying forward. I drove home with the engine quiet and the streetlights standing like patient sentries. The silence in my car opened a door I had kept shut for years. Memory sat beside me and watched the road. Tonight did not begin when a groom told me to leave. It began when I was 19 and believed kindness could hold a roof in place through any weather. I met Robert at a library table, stacked with used textbooks. He smiled with a shy warmth. He tucked a pencil behind his ear and said he studied by listening for the sound of truth. We were broke and stubborn. We promised hard work would make room for a gentle life. We married at the courthouse. The clerk coaxed a smile from my cautious mother. I wore a second-hand dress. Robert slipped a simple gold ring on my finger. We vowed to speak each other's names with respect even when money was thin. The winter he died, the roads were glass and the factory ran a double shift. He borrowed a coworker's truck and kissed my forehead at the door. Soup simmered on the stove. The radio played a slow song. The call came before the soup cooled. A driver spun out near the bridge. The truck rolled. The hospital smelled like bleach and endings. I remember the doctor's shoes, polished yet salted by the walk from the lot. Someone handed me a clipboard. I signed my name and felt it drift like breath in cold air. Back in our apartment, the sink dripped and the radiator hissed. I looked at my ring and at the folder where I kept tuition bills for the degree I had planned to finish. I called the registrar and asked to postpone. The woman spoke gently, but her tone closed a door. I told myself it would be 1 semester, then 2. Years arrived like quiet tenants and never left. When Lydia turned 2, the rent rose while my salary did not. I slid the ring off and tucked it into a velvet pouch. The pawnshop smelled like old wood and someone else's heartbreak. The man weighed the ring without meeting my eyes. He counted out bills. I counted what the money would cover. Rent, groceries, a toddler's winter coat, shoes that would keep water out. I walked home with 2 paper bags and a hand that felt both lighter and heavier. I learned to stack hours like bricks. Mornings in the classroom, afternoons grading, nights at the diner, refilling coffee for men who treated arguments like sport. I learned which tables tipped in quarters, which ones left folded 5s beneath saucers, how to swallow pride when a stranger snapped his fingers. On my breaks, I studied from borrowed textbooks. On bus rides, I wrote lesson plans in the margins of advertisements. I stitched my days together with safety pins and quiet prayers. There were small mercies that kept air moving in my lungs. Lydia's hair smelled like apples when she fell asleep on the couch. Cartoons hummed from a thrifted television while I ironed shirts on a folded towel. The neighbor down the hall slid a casserole to my door with a note that said, "Keep going." I taped Robert's first love note to the fridge. I kept the pawn ticket in my ledger as a promise to buy the ring back when life loosened its grip. When Lydia started first grade, a supervisor urged me to apply for a master's program. I printed the forms and flattened them beneath a salt shaker to stop the corners from curling. On the due date, Lydia woke flushed and glassy-eyed. The clinic was crowded. The nurse told us to return tomorrow. I missed the deadline. The envelope stayed unsealed for a week. Then I tore it up and took an extra shift at the diner. I told myself that motherhood was a degree no university could confer. It lived in the body and in the long habit of showing up. We lived by lists taped to the inside of a cupboard door. Pay electricity, buy milk, check tire pressure, patch the knee on Lydia's jeans, call the landlord, return library books before the fine doubled. On Sundays, I scrubbed classrooms for extra pay. I knelt on tile and scraped gum from the undersides of desks, while Lydia colored planets at a student table. She would hand me a drawing of a rocket and say that one day we would travel. I would nod and say yes and mean it with every corner of my heart. I kept Robert alive in stories. I told Lydia how he fixed radios by listening for the song between stations, how he could balance a broom on his palm and make her hiccup with laughter. I taught her that integrity is what remains when everything else has been sold. When she cried over cafeteria rumors, I showed her how to breathe through the fire and walk with her shoulders back. Names are anchored by how we carry them. I learned that while sweeping a diner floor at midnight. If you ask why I paid for a wedding that later became a class in boundaries, the answer lives here. These years trained me to make room for other people's joy and to mistake that sacrifice for safety. I believed gifts could stitch a family where respect had begun to fray. I thought generosity could outvote contempt. Tonight reminded me that love without self-respect is charity with a hole in the pocket. The harder you press it, the more it spills. I still keep the pawn ticket. The number is a small museum label for the beginning we could not afford to keep. The ledger rides in my purse. Its pages carry the math of a lifetime. Tuition deferred, ring exchanged, hours counted, promises kept. I do not tell you this for pity. I tell you because I need you to see the foundation under my quiet. When I canceled the wedding payments, I was not erasing love. I was honoring every version of me who bent and carried until bending hardened into a habit. I was choosing to stand upright in the only way I could afford. Robert once said that dignity is a tool you must keep sharpened. Tonight I found the stone. I thought of the day I sold the ring and of the night I shredded the graduate forms. I thought of the ledger ink that bled when rain snuck through a windowsill. I thought of Lydia, asleep with a fever, her hand hot against my wrist, and of the decision to hold her while opportunity waited in a mailbox I never reached. I thought of my students learning to sound out hope one syllable at a time. I drove past the river and parked by the curb where we once watched fireworks from a blanket spread on damp grass. I sat there and breathed like a woman finishing a long race. I understood that the past had not asked me to disappear. It had asked me to pay attention. Every sacrifice had been a line in a ledger. Every line had a reason. Every reason deserved respect. Tonight I respected the cost. I respected the teacher who stayed late, the waitress who smiled through aching feet, the mother who chose fever over forms. I respected the widow who learned to fix a leaky pipe with a wrench and a prayer. I checked the time. The hour that broke their party had built my spine. I turned the key and headed home, ready to sleep without bargaining with my worth. In the rear view, the streetlights kept their post. In the front seat, memory finally rested. In my chest, a quiet future took its first breath. I carried home a steadier, quieter heart. I had just set my keys in the ceramic bowl when the knocking started, hard enough to rattle the chain on the door. Night pressed against the windows. The apartment smelled like lemon cleaner and the steam of tea I never finished. I looked through the peephole and saw my daughter on the landing, mascara blurred, bouquet frayed. I opened the door half an arm's width. "Lydia," I said. She pushed inside without waiting to be asked. "Mom, you are ruining my life." The words hit like a thrown glass. "I am done ruining my own," I said. My voice surprised us both, even and steady. "Close the door." She kicked it shut. "Do you know what you've done?" The venue called. The florist packed up. People are posting. Ethan's parents are furious. Guests are confused. We are humiliated. "You told me to leave," I said. "Your groom made sure everyone heard it." "I didn't tell you to cancel everything," she shot back. "This was my wedding." "It was my gift," I answered, "and gifts do not include permission to strip the giver of dignity." She flinched. "You waited until the last minute to sabotage us." "I waited until the last minute to recognize myself," I said. She paced. The train of her dress hissed across the rug. She touched the family photograph. Her fingers paused on Robert's face. "He would not have done this," she said. "He taught me to keep my name," I replied. "Tonight I did." Her eyes flashed. "Ethan says you hate him." "I do not hate him," I said. "I dislike what his voice tried to make me believe about my worth." She folded her arms. "You could have spoken to us calmly. You could have waited until after." "I did speak calmly," I said. "I also acted. Waiting until after would have taught you the wrong lesson." "What lesson is that?" "That love without respect is a debt that collects interest," I said. "I have paid enough." She exhaled, frustrated, wounded. "We will lose money." "I lost years," I said. "Time is not refundable." She went to the window and pushed aside the curtain. The street below carried traffic. A siren unspooled into distance. "People will think I am ungrateful." "Do you think you are ungrateful?" I asked. She did not answer. She looked at her hands, at the groove where the bouquet ribbon rubbed her skin. Then the adult returned. "Ethan says you did this to punish us," she said. "I did this to protect what I built," I replied. "There is a difference you will feel in your bones one day." Tears gathered and held. "You always make everything about your sacrifices." "Sacrifice is not a medal," I said. "It is a receipt. I kept them because no one else would." She glanced at the ledger on the table. Her voice fell. "I knew you were paying. I did not know it would feel like a trial." "It is not a trial," I said. "It is an audit." Silence settled. Lydia's breathing slowed. She touched the ceramic bowl by the entry. Her ring tapped the rim. "What would it take to fix this?" she asked, softer, "to make you turn the payments back on?" Respect, I said, publicly, without script, not to save face, but to tell the truth. She stared at me. You want me to embarrass Ethan? I want you to honor yourself, I said. If that embarrasses him, the problem is not the honoring. She shook her head. He will never agree. Then you have your answer, I said. Her eyes filled again. You are choosing money over your daughter. I am choosing boundaries, I said. They protect both of us. She sat on the edge of the couch and looked at the framed sketch she drew at 7, a stick family under 3 yellow stars. Her voice was very small. I told you I would make you proud. You can, I said, but not by asking me to disappear. Footsteps passed the landing. Lydia stood, gathering the train, the bouquet shedding petals onto the rug. At the threshold, she paused, hand on the knob, then turned back. Will you come if we keep the ceremony small? She asked. Only family. I will come when I am invited with respect, I said, and when you invite yourself to it first. She opened the door. Air lifted the veil at her shoulder. For a heartbeat, she started to reach for me. Then she let her hand fall. Good night, Mom, she said. Good night, I answered. Go safely. I breathed slowly, counting to 5, letting the hours of this night settle into place like books on a shelf. The latch clicked. I stood still and let the quiet find its shape. On the table, the ledger lay open to a page that held both columns, what they wanted, what I must do. I closed the book and set it by Robert's photo. Outside, a car door shut. An engine turned. A life made a choice I could not make for it. I did not sleep. I brewed tea and watched the steam fade while my phone turned into a siren. Notifications stacked like hailstones. By midnight, Ethan's version of the night had entered the world. He posted a photograph of Lydia's bouquet on a linen table. The caption read, "Pray for us. Her mother canceled our wedding out of jealousy." His family amplified it across their pages. I could have answered. Part of me wanted to type a thread and attach receipts. Instead, I practiced the new muscle of restraint. I set the phone on the table and listened to the building settle. A radiator sighed. A bus groaned at the corner. Silence is not weakness. It is a field where truth grows when no one is trampling it. By 1 o'clock, acquaintances began to choose sides. A former neighbor claimed I had always been controlling. An old colleague replied with a line about boundaries. Lydia remained silent. A selfie from the morning still sat at the top of her page. She looked like a child wearing a dream. The dream had been lifted out of the room and out of my account. That quiet cut deeper than Ethan's bark. At 2, a message slid into my inbox from Clara, my friend who keeps a sewing kit in her purse. Do you want me to say something? She wrote. I saw the invoices. I know where those flowers came from. I sat with that for a moment. The old me would have told her not to get involved. The woman who had canceled a wedding understood that truth needs a chaperone. I wrote back, tell the truth. Nothing more. She replied with a heart. Then she went to work. Half an hour later, Clara posted a simple statement with a photograph of my handwriting from a fitting form. I altered the dress. Sylvia paid my bill in cash. She tipped me for staying late. She is not jealous. She is generous. The comments under her post bloomed in 2 directions. Some dismissed her as a meddler. Many thanked her for speaking plainly. She did not argue. She held the line. Around 3, an email pinged. Subject, contract cancellation, venue confirmation. The manager wrote, per your request, the Meyer-Whittaker event has been removed from our calendar. Funds will be processed according to clause 12. As the signatory of record, you have full authority. A timestamp change log sat below his note. I forwarded it to my archive and then to Marjorie, not to win, but to stop the calls I knew would come by dawn. More posts arrived. Ethan's father accused me of undermining a young man's future. Others called me selfish. A parent from my old school messaged to ask whether I needed groceries. He had seen me stretch pennies for field trips and could not reconcile that woman with the caricature on his screen. I thanked him. What I needed was time. At 4, the night thinned. I opened the pantry and found the tin of chamomile Lydia bought when she was 15. She had wrapped it in newspaper and tape, proud to pay for something on her own. I brewed a cup and read through my notes. The pen marks looked calm. The decision seemed inevitable. What surprised me was the lightness beneath them. Courage rarely feels like thunder. It often feels like air entering a room that was sealed too long. I checked Ethan's page again and saw a video shot from the ballroom. He spoke to the camera about forgiveness and family. He said I had weaponized money. He said real love does not keep score. Behind him, someone laughed near the dessert table. He pinned the video. Comments surged. Lydia did not appear. She tapped a small heart. Then she vanished again. At 5, Clara sent a screenshot from a neighborhood group where the venue manager had responded to rumors. Our contracts name the responsible party. We follow the contract. Please be kind to our staff, he wrote. It was not dramatic. It was decisive. The narrative shifted by a few degrees. Neutral truth can move mountains when the ground under the story is already unstable. I have been a teacher long enough to know that people learn on their own schedule. I did not expect the internet to deliver repentance before sunrise. The point was not to punish, it was to place facts where they belonged and sit still while noise wore itself out. Despite the din, the room inside my chest grew quiet. I washed the cup. I turned off the kitchen light. I stood at Robert's photo and said goodnight. The phone buzzed one last time as dawn lifted the sky. A message from Lydia, unsent, then resent, appeared as a single line. I do not know what to say. I stared at it until it blurred, then typed, "When you are ready to speak with respect, I am here." I added nothing. Outside, the bus sighed. Inside, the notifications slowed. Truth had left its footprints. I would let them dry. The knock arrived before the sun cleared the rooftops, quick, hard, insistent. I had just rinsed my cup when the sound hit again. I dried my hands, set the cup on the counter, and looked through the peephole. Ethan stood there, jaw tight, tie loose, the afterglow of last night's anger on his face. I opened the door a hand's width and kept the chain latched. "What do you want?" I asked. "What do I want?" he barked. "I want you to fix what you broke. You blindsided us. You embarrassed my family. You made Lydia cry." I breathed once, slow and full. I did not remove the chain. He filled the doorway with the swagger of a man who thinks volume equals truth. "You will call the vendors," he said. "You will reinstate the payments. You will apologize. And you will stay out of the way while we salvage what is left." The apartment was quiet enough to hear the oven tick. I let his words sit between us. Silence can be a leveler. It shows which voice is standing on shaky ground. He waved his phone like a badge. "Everyone has seen what you did. The posts, the comments. You are making yourself look terrible." I watched the screen reflect in the chain, a thin line of light across steel. He took my stillness as permission to continue. "Lydia is ashamed. My parents are humiliated. People drove in from out of state. Do you think anyone will forget this? Do you think anyone will forgive you?" I rested my palm against the door frame and thought of the ledger on my table. I thought of Clara's post and the venue's email. I thought of the girl in the ballroom whispering that I was not wrong. My throat was steady. "You are going to talk," he snapped. "Say something." I nodded once and unhooked the chain. I opened the door and stepped aside. He strode in, shoulders squared, eyes scanning my small living room as if inventorying a crime scene. He frowned at the photo of Robert. "You had no right," he said. "This day was not about you." I picked up the expense ledger and laid it on the coffee table without opening it. The gesture felt like placing a witness on the stand. I sat. He stayed standing, looming, choosing height as strategy. "Do you know what a spectacle you caused?" he said. "Lydia is hiding because of you. I have to fix your mess." I folded my hands. He mistook that for surrender and pressed harder. Here is how this goes. You will wire fresh deposits today. You will post an apology. You will tell people stress got to you. Then we move forward. When I finally spoke, my voice was almost a whisper. No. He blinked. Confusion flashed, then anger returned. No is not an option. It is the only option, I said. He pointed at the ledger. You think receipts give you power. Responsibility means you do not get to pull it away because your feelings got hurt. I stood. You are right that responsibility matters, I said. It is why I ended a contract the moment it became a vehicle for contempt. He laughed without humor. Contempt. You decided that because your pride took a bump. I walked to the window and lifted the blind a few inches. Morning had found the street. I spoke to the glass so my words would stay even. When a man tells a mother she does not belong at her daughter's wedding, he is not bumping pride. He is severing kinship. He followed, crowding the space. You think in slogans. Real life is compromise. I have compromised for decades, I said. I traded. Sleep for shifts and dreams for bills. I will not trade dignity. He exhaled through his nose. You like being a martyr, but you will not ruin my reputation to feed your story. I turned and met his eyes. I let silence stand beside me like an elder. His gaze flickered first. He looked down at his phone, then to the photograph again, as if expecting the dead to vote with him. When I spoke, it was to the room, to my past, to whatever piece of the future was listening. Happiness bought with a mother's humiliation is not happiness. He rolled his eyes. You dramatic people love aphorisms. He pocketed the phone. Consider this your last chance. I already took my last chance, I said. I took it when I left the ballroom with my spine intact. For a heartbeat, he seemed smaller, a man in an ill-fitting suit whose plans had been told no by a door he did not own. He gathered himself, opened the door, and stood in its frame. You will regret this, he said. Perhaps, I answered, but I will not be ashamed of it. He left without slamming anything. Even his anger had learned a lesson about thresholds. I locked the door, lifted the chain, and let the quiet return to its work. The morning held its breath. The chain had barely settled when the knock returned, softer yet insistent. I knew that rhythm. Marjorie always knocked like someone practicing patience for other people. I opened the door. My sister stood in a quilted coat, hair pulled back, worry stitched across her forehead. She stepped inside with the purposeful stride of a nurse making rounds. Tell me you are going to fix this, she said. I have been on the phone since dawn. People are calling. The family thread is exploding. Say you will make a statement and reinstate the payments. I walked to the kitchen and lifted the kettle. Good morning to you too, I said. Sylvia, please, you know how our family is. We keep the peace. We do not turn private difficulty into public drama. Lydia needs you to be gracious. Be the bigger person. I was told I did not belong at my daughter's wedding, I said. I left. Then I ended the contracts that bore my name. That is not drama. That is housekeeping. She rubbed her temples. You are choosing a point to prove over your own child. Do not do this. Say it was stress. Say you misunderstood. Apologize. We will all move on. Will we? I asked. Or will we move back to where I disappear and call it harmony? Her eyes went to the ledger. You kept records. No one denies you paid. That is not the point. The point is relationship. Sometimes you pay twice to protect it. I poured chamomile. I have paid 10 times, 1,000 times. Money, sleep, years. I am not purchasing my own erasure. She sat. Ethan's mother called me. She is ashamed. The neighbors will talk. This will follow Lydia for years. You know how small towns are. Then perhaps small towns can learn a larger lesson, I said. You have always been like this, stubborn, righteous. You cannot bend when bending would help the rest of us breathe. The tea burns, I said, but the heat feels honest. I have bent until my bones learn the shape of someone else's comfort. Fine, she said, voice rising. I will say it plainly. You embarrassed us. You made the Carters and the Whitakers look cheap and chaotic. Lydia is humiliated. Is that what you wanted? I wanted to be treated as a person, not a wallet, I said. I wanted my daughter to lift her hand and say, stop. She did not. Because she was overwhelmed, Marjorie said. Because weddings are complicated. Because the boy is proud. Because men say stupid things when they are nervous. I know the intonation of a man who means it, I said. She leaned in. This is where you choose. Stubborn pride or family. Be practical. Give the money. Make peace. It is only money. I laughed once. Tired, not cruel. You only say it is only money when it is mine. Her mouth tightened. You think I do not sacrifice? I keep a marriage together by keeping my mouth shut. I keep Mom's birthday dinners running when no one brings anything. And I learned how to fix what breaks, I said. Different skills. I am asking you as your sister. Be generous for Lydia's sake. I have been generous for Lydia's sake since the day she breathed, I said. I have kept quiet my whole life. Enough. The words surprised even me. They stood between us like a fence. Marjorie blinked, then recovered. So that is it. You will punish her to teach a lesson. I will protect myself to teach a truth, I said. Respect is not a luxury, it is the floor. What if Lydia apologizes privately? Would that be enough? No, I said. The wound was public. The repair must be public, not a spectacle. A sentence, simple and true. Ethan will never allow it, she said. Then the problem is bigger than a canceled party, I replied. She stood. Do not expect me to defend you at every dinner table. People will say you are hard. I am not hard, I said. I am finished being soft in the places that tear. I remember the day you pawned your ring, she said quietly. You would not let me come. You said you did not want me to see you choose between rent and sentiment. I chose us, I said. I always have. She nodded. I know, she said. I also know that peace matters. Real peace, I said, or silence that keeps the picture pretty. She did not answer. She picked up the ledger, read a page, set it down. If I tell them you will not budge, they will turn on you harder. They already have, I said. I am still here. She walked to the door. This will change the family. It already has, I said. Maybe it needed to. She paused. If Lydia calls, me, what should I tell her? Tell her I love her, I said. Tell her I am here when respect is, too. Marjorie opened the door. Morning light widened across the floor. She did not hug me. Our family saves affection for holidays. She said, You are braver than me. I answered, I am finally as brave as I needed to be. The latch clicked. Her footsteps faded. The apartment felt different, as if a wall had moved and a new draft had found a path. I stood still and let the room discover its new shape. The message came not in words, but in a silence too heavy to ignore. That evening, after Marjorie left, I heard a faint knock. It was not Ethan's pounding. It was lighter, slower, as though the hand itself was uncertain. I opened the door, and there stood Lydia. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair pulled back in haste. No jewelry, no polish, just my daughter, stripped of all ceremony. For a moment she stood frozen. I almost reached for her. But then Ethan appeared behind her, a shadow too close, a grip on her arm that tightened when I stepped forward. Mom, she whispered. Just one word. I said nothing. Silence had become my shield. Her lips trembled. She lifted her hand halfway, palm open, as if to reach for me. I saw it. The smallest act of rebellion, the beginning of a bridge. But before it could close the space between us, Ethan tugged her wrist back, subtle but strong. She winced, Her hand fell, and my daughter's gaze dropped to the floor. The world slowed. In that instant, my body betrayed me, pulling me backward into memory. A storm, years ago. Lydia, no older than 6, trembling in her nightgown while thunder cracked above our small house. The rain beat on the roof like fists. She had run into my room, clutching her blanket, her eyes wide, cheeks wet. "Mom, hold me," she begged. I had wrapped her in my arms, pulling her against my chest, my body a barrier between her and the chaos outside. I whispered into her hair, "I've got you. Nothing will harm you while you're here." She had pressed her tiny hands into my nightshirt, clinging with a trust that felt holy. That memory clashed with the present. Then her little hands clung to me as though I was the last solid thing in a broken world. Now, those same hands were caught in another man's grip, pulled away from me. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to say her name, to beg her to look up, to remember that storm, that night, that promise. But I stood still. I remembered my vow not to beg anymore, not to trade dignity for scraps of affection. Ethan spoke for her. "She's here to tell you that this ends. You stop the noise, you stop embarrassing her, or you won't see her again." Lydia's eyes darted to mine. I saw the war inside them. The dutiful wife, the frightened daughter, the woman not yet sure where her own spine ended and his began. Her lips parted as though words wanted to escape, but none arrived. I answered him without shifting my gaze from her. "If she has something to say, let her say it herself." He pressed her arm tighter. "She already did. Through me." Her shoulders flinched. Her silence was louder than his sentence. The kettle clicked behind me. I had forgotten I'd put water on for tea. That small domestic sound seemed absurd in the middle of this battlefield. I stepped aside. "Come in, Lydia," I said softly. "Both of you, if you must." They entered. He led, she followed, tethered. She sat on the edge of the couch like a guest in her own childhood home. Her eyes moved to the framed photo of her 6th birthday, her in a paper crown, me behind her, my hands on her shoulders. For a flicker of a second, I thought she would speak. Instead, Ethan filled the room. "We are done letting you dictate. Lydia belongs with me now. Your role is over. Do you understand that?" I turned to her. "Do you believe that, Lydia?" Her lips quivered again. I watched her hand twitch on her lap, as though it wanted to move but was pinned by an invisible weight. My chest ached. The storm memory returned, her tiny hand reaching for mine in the dark. I wanted to scream, to remind her of who we were. But I waited. She inhaled deep. Her eyes rose to meet mine, and for half a heartbeat, I saw her. The girl in the storm, the child who trusted me, the daughter who once believed I was unshakable. Then Ethan's voice cut in, sharp. "Say it, Lydia, tell her." Her gaze faltered. "Mom," she whispered again, and nothing more. That word carried the weight of 2 lives colliding. It was apology and plea. It was longing and surrender. It broke me open even as I held myself still. Ethan scowled. "Pathetic," he muttered. "We're leaving." He pulled her arm. She stood slowly, as though every inch upward cost her something. At the door, she turned. One last look. Her eyes glistened. She tried again to lift her hand, but once more he tugged her away. The door shut. I stood in the quiet, the kettle still warm, the echo of thunder from long ago ringing in my memory. My daughter had tried to reach me, and twice she had been pulled back, yet the hesitation, that almost touch, burned brighter in me than any silence. I sat at the table, hands on the ledger, and whispered to the empty room, "I am still here, Lydia. I will always be here when you are ready." And for the first time, the silence did not feel like defeat. It felt like waiting for a storm to pass, knowing that somewhere, beyond the rain, my daughter still remembered my arms around her in the night. Morning turned to a pale afternoon. The sky looked rinsed, like a sheet stretched thin over light. I was sorting receipts back into the ledger when the buzzer sounded. It was Clara holding a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon rolls. I let her in. She set the bag on the table, glanced at my face, and wrapped me in a hug. When we sat, she reached for the ledger but stopped her hand in midair. "Only if you want," she said. Clear and simple truth. "I do," I answered. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. "There is something I have not told anyone. Not Marjorie, not Lydia, not even you." Clara folded her hands. "Tell me if telling it will help." I opened the back cover and pulled out an envelope worn soft at the edges. The Union emblem was faded, the ink browned by years of air. "This is from Robert's retirement fund," I said. "He worked 20 years at the plant before the accident. We kept a small account alive after the funeral because it felt like a thread tying Lydia to her father." I slid out the statement and laid it between us. 3 months ago, I withdrew most of what was left. There was a penalty. I signed anyway. I used it to pay deposits. Clara's breath caught. She did not reach for the paper. She looked at me instead. "Sylvia," she whispered. I told myself it was a blessing with Robert's name on it, I said, a way for him to be present at his daughter's table. I thought if I built it large enough, the room would make room for me. I was wrong. The door buzzer went again. Marjorie's voice crackled through the speaker. She had a talent for arriving when conversation turned costly. I let her up. She entered briskly, carrying tension like a purse. "I have 5 minutes before I need to be at work," she said. "We need to coordinate what you are going to say to the family." Clara gave me a question with her eyes. I nodded. "Show her," I said. Marjorie sat. I placed the envelope in front of her. She skimmed the letter. Her face shifted, calculation giving way to grief. "You took from Robert's retirement," she said. Not accusatory, not kind, simply stunned. "I did," I said. "I believed I was investing in our child's future, in our family's peace. Today I understand I was paying for permission to remain visible." Marjorie pressed her palm to her mouth. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because you would have told me not to," I said, with a small, tired smile. "And I did not want to be talked out of generosity. I wanted to believe kindness could change the ending." Clara exhaled slowly. "This is what people do not see when they comment from couches," she said. "They see a headline. They do not see the hand that signs a withdrawal slip with a wedding date circled on a calendar." I nodded. "I hear Ethan calling me jealous. I read neighbors calling me selfish. They cannot imagine a woman cashing in what remains of her husband's old life to honor her daughter's new one." I tapped the statement. "But I can." I did. Marjorie's voice softened. "We grew up being taught to smooth things," she said, "to keep the peace, to hush, to fold. I asked you to bend again because that is how we survived." "I know," I answered. I bent until bending felt like breathing. Yesterday I remembered how to stand. She traced the Union emblem. "Robert would have hated seeing you hurt. He would have hated seeing me erased more," I said. "He taught me that dignity is not a luxury. It is a tool." Clara leaned forward. "Do you want this known?" she asked. "It will change the conversation. It may also invite more noise." "I want it known to the people whose opinions can wound me," I said. "Family first. Truth belongs where the lies grew." Marjorie nodded through tears she tried to hide. "I will tell the thread," she said, "not for spectacle, for understanding." I placed the envelope back in the ledger and closed the book like a door. This was the last inheritance with Robert's name on it. I used it to feed a celebration that could not make room for the woman who kept it alive. That is my part of the story. I can carry it without bitterness. Clara reached for my hand. "What do you need?" "Only this," I said. "When people speak about me, ask them whether the word selfish belongs next to a widow who traded interest for love." We sat with the question. The room felt lighter, not because the debt vanished, but because the truth had climbed onto the table and refused to move. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, the clock ticked toward evening. I brewed tea. We drank without speaking. The steam curled and disappeared into air, finally large enough for me to breathe. It began with a screenshot. Someone on social media leaked a line item from my credit card. A hotel suite in Maui, booked under Lydia and Ethan's names, but charged to my account. The post traveled quickly, picked up by neighbors, shared by old classmates, magnified by whispers that had already been circling. The caption beneath the image was simple. If Sylvia is selfish, why did she buy the honeymoon? I found out because Clara knocked on my door holding her phone, eyes wide. It's everywhere, she said. People are finally seeing. I sat at the kitchen table, folded my hands, and stared at the pattern of wood grain. The noise outside my door was shifting. Hours earlier, I was the villain in a dozen retellings. Now, the air hummed with a different tune. One friend of Lydia's posted a long note. We all knew Mrs. Carter worked 2 jobs after her husband died. We knew she saved every penny. To see her gift dismissed like this? Well, it's hard to respect Ethan after what he said at the wedding. Another wrote, if she covered the honeymoon, maybe she covered more. Maybe the narrative about selfishness is upside down. I didn't answer any of it. I brewed tea, set the cup on its saucer, and let silence do what years of explanations never could. Marjorie called. You're trending, she said, as if the word belonged to a stranger's world. People are defending you now. Even some of Ethan's relatives are asking questions. Lydia's bridesmaids are posting that you were generous. It's spreading. I listened. The kettle clicked as it cooled. I said only, the truth has its own legs. On the screen, more comments gathered. Some who once demanded I apologize were now retracting. We judged too quickly. We didn't know the full story. Even the caterer released a statement. Mrs. Carter was a model client, always punctual with payments. We regret the misunderstanding. Clara read them aloud, her voice rising with each one. See? The tide is turning. People can't spin against receipts. But I did not smile. I thought of Robert's retirement account, of the years it took to grow, of the 1 hour it took to erase. Public opinion cannot restore what is gone. Still, the chorus building outside gave me something Robert always said was priceless. Dignity visible to the world. I walked to the window. Across the street, a neighbor who had avoided me yesterday raised her hand in a small wave. I lifted mine in return. It was the smallest gesture, yet it felt like a door reopening. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message forwarded from Lydia's college friend. Tell your mother she deserves better. We're with her. For the first time in days, my breath loosened in my chest. I did not rush to respond. Silence had become my language of resistance, my proof that I would no longer beg to be understood. By evening, the story had mutated into debates on fairness, on women funding celebrations, on the respect children owe their parents. My name appeared in conversations far outside my town. People who had never seen me were drawing lessons from my quiet. Marjorie texted, "Say something, Sylvia. A thank you post at least." I set the phone down without answering. The power of this moment was not in words. It was in restraint. To speak would be to return to pleading. To remain silent was to show that my worth had never depended on argument. As night settled, I lit a small candle on the table, the way Robert used to when storms cut the power. The flame flickered steady. Outside, the world was speaking my name. Inside, I finally felt no need to defend it. And in that hush, I understood. Sometimes silence is not the absence of voice. It is the sound of dignity standing upright. The day that should have been a wedding, rose bright and salt-scented. Gulls stitched white arcs over the water as I drove to the shore. I chose a small cafe that faced the ocean. The sign creaked, the windows shone, and the doorbell chimed like a spoon on china. I asked for a corner table near the glass and set my purse down as if lowering a sleeping child. The waitress brought chamomile tea in a white cup and a saucer with a thin blue rim. Beside it, I placed the mother-of-pearl hairpin that the stylist had mailed back to me after the contracts dissolved. Its surface held tiny rainbows when the light turned. I took off my coat. My shoulders loosened. I watched the waves fold and unfold. I listened to the soft chorus of spoons, the rustle of a newspaper, the low rumble of conversation that had nothing to do with me. I slid my phone from my purse, opened the camera, and framed the cup and the hairpin with the ocean breathing beyond them. I took the picture. I typed a caption. Sometimes, standing up is not making a scene. It is choosing to sit where you truly belong. I pressed post and set the phone face down. Steam lifted in ribbons from the tea. I wrapped both palms around the cup and felt warmth travel into the ache in my wrists. The hairpin lay still. When Lydia was little, she used to tilt it in the light and call it a moon you could hold. A couple at the next table laughed softly. The sound floated like a lullaby. Somewhere down the boardwalk, a dog barked. A child answered with delight. The ordinary world was doing its work. I thought of the venue manager's email. The date had been rebooked. There would be music in that hall today, just not ours. I pictured a different bride fastening her earrings, a mother smoothing a sleeve, a band testing a chord. I wished them well. The waitress refilled my hot water and smiled at the hairpin. "Pretty," she said. "Old," I answered. She nodded as if those words meant the same thing. When she left, I lifted the clip and studied the fine scratches that years had given it. My phone buzzed once, then again. I ignored it. I was practicing a different posture, not the hunch of apology, but the length of a spine allowed to rest. Through the glass, I followed a sailboat easing toward the mouth of the harbor. Robert would have named the wind and explained the rigging. I heard his patient voice moving through the room I carried inside me. I did not cry. Instead, I took a slow breath and counted 4 beats in, 4 beats out. An hour passed, measured by the kettle on the counter and the long exhale of the espresso machine. I ordered a slice of lemon cake and ate it without guilt, tart and sweet, like honesty that stings before it heals. A shadow crossed the window. For a moment, I thought it might be Lydia. It was only a cloud. I touched the hairpin and sent her a silent message anyway. I am here. I am not vanishing. I will not fund my own disappearance. The door opened. A gust of salt brushed the tables. An older couple in hiking boots paused near me to admire the view. The woman noticed my tea. "Good choice," she said. "Best," I replied. She smiled and moved on. Simple human grace, unearned and generous. I let it land. When the bill came, I paid in cash and left a tip that would make a server's shift feel lighter. As I stood, the hairpin glinted. I slid it into my hair. The clasp clicked with a sound that felt like a small vow. Outside, the sky had cleared to the color of blue found on old postcards. I walked the boardwalk slowly, counting steps, counting blessings that were not currency, legs that still carried me, lungs that learned to breathe again. I thought of the scholarship in Robert's name. The clause I had buried in the contract redirected the deposit when I canceled under my authority. Somewhere, a student working nights would buy books without choosing between ink and groceries. That knowledge settled through me like warm bread. It did not erase loss. It proved that endings can be generous when chosen with care. Down at the seawall, I sat and watched a second sailboat tack toward open. Water dot far out. A line of sunlight opened on the waves. I knew storms would come again. They always do. But I also knew what shelter felt like now. It tasted like chamomile. It weighed like a hairpin. It sounded like a caption that did not argue, only declared a boundary with kindness. I turned my face to the wind and let it replace the last stale air in my chest. Somewhere, music was starting for a different pair of vows. Here, another vow formed quietly in me. I would not mistake silence for surrender again. I would use it as a home where self-respect could live. I stood, tucked my chair back under the cafe table, and walked toward the parking lot with the steady gait of someone who had chosen her seat and her future well. By the time I reached the parking lot, the tide had rolled higher. The air tasted clean and wind threaded salt through my hair. I rested my palms on the warm hood and watched a line of foam right itself along the shore. The phone began to ring. Ethan's name flashed. I let it ring out. It rang again, then his mother, then a number from his father's office. I set the phone on the roof so the vibration would not touch me. I looked at the sky instead. I let the horizon steady me. Distance can be a teacher when voices try to shrink your world. Voicemails stacked. In the first, Ethan sounded clipped and managerial. He wanted a meeting. He wanted deposits restored. He wanted a statement to protect his image. He said reputations were at stake. The second message came from his mother, voice hushed as if gossip lived inside her phone. "Weddings are fragile," she cooed. "I should be gracious." The third was his father, curt and legal. I pressed delete on each message, not angry, not triumphant. Calm. A gull landed on the rail and studied me like a patient judge. The sea kept breathing. I brewed no argument. I owed none. Another call. This time, I answered. "Sylvia," his father said, skipping hello. "We should find common ground. If you reverse the cancellations, the venue will host a scaled ceremony. We will assume remaining costs. Discretion will be appreciated." "Thank you for the offer," I said. "My decision stands." "You are making it difficult to de-escalate." "I am declining to finance my own humiliation," I said. "That is not escalation. That is a boundary." A pause. Paper shuffled. "At least agree to a statement that frames this as a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," I said. "It was a sentence spoken into a microphone." He tried another angle. "Lydia will suffer." "Lydia will learn," I said. "We all will." I ended the call and powered the phone off, returning a tool to its drawer. I sat on a low wall and watched the tide tuck itself under the pier. For years, I answered every ring. Today, the problems could wait while I watched water become itself. Footsteps scuffed the boardwalk. Ethan appeared, windblown, jacket unbuttoned, eyes restless. He stopped threes, spaces away, as if the air between us were a checkpoint. "We can fix this," he said. "My parents will cover what you withdrew if you apologize publicly and explain that stress affected your judgment. You are fortunate to come from people who will pay for your words," I said. "This is not about words," he snapped. "It is about outcomes." "Words are outcomes," I said. "They build the rooms we stand in." He tried a lighter tone. "You love Lydia. She loves you. We can move forward." "I will always love Lydia," I said. "Moving forward requires respect." He stared at the water as if it might translate me. "You are enjoying this power." "I am inhabiting my life," I said. "That may look like enjoyment from where you stand." He shifted. "People will remember you as the mother who ruined a wedding. People will also remember me as the woman who refused to purchase disrespect," I said. "Memory can hold two truths." A gust lifted his tie. He smoothed it down, a reflex of control. "Last chance," he said, voice softer. "Do the right thing." "I already did," I said. He turned and walked toward the lot, shoulders squared against a wind he could not order. When I powered the phone back on, messages bloomed. Some begged, some scolded, a few apologized. I replied to none. The ocean kept its tempo. Clouds opened like curtains to a patch of warmer blue. I breathed in and let the exhale lengthen until my ribs settled. The balance had shifted, not because I had won, but because I had stopped performing loss as love. A small boy in a red jacket ran past me, his father trailing with a camera. The boy shouted that the waves were writing letters. I looked and saw the truth of it. Each swell spelled something and then erased it for the next. Let them write what they want, I thought. Let the water keep teaching revision. The phone rang again, his mother, now urgent. She feared embarrassment, donations withheld, cousins turning away. She promised grace if I would be discreet. I watched a sale snap full and said nothing. I let the call expire and the message dissolve into air. I slid the hairpin from my hair and held it to the light. The nacre caught sun and returned it softer. I felt the same change in myself. I was not in danger. I was not on trial. I was not waiting for a verdict. I raised my face to the wind and felt what power is when it belongs to you, quiet, durable, uninterested in witnesses. Then I walked to the car and took the scenic road home, unhurried because time finally felt like mine to spend. Back home, I left the window open. Salt air moved through the curtains while afternoon light lay across the table like a folded quilt. I set the hairpin beside the ledger and boiled water for tea. When the kettle sang, my phone buzzed once, then again. It was Marjorie. She did not call. She sent a single text. "Sister, I was wrong." I stared at the words until the steam thinned. Nothing in our childhood had trained us to type that sentence. Our house rewarded silence, rewarded women who smoothed napkins and swallowed arguments. I typed back only a question. "Do you want to come over?" A moment later, she replied, "I am outside." I opened the door to find her on the landing with a sack of oranges and a stiff bouquet from the grocery store. She handed me the fruit like an apology that wanted vitamin C to carry it. We moved to the kitchen. I poured tea. We stood without speaking while the room recalibrated around a new truth. "I read the scholarship clause," she said. "I read about the honeymoon on your card. I read Clara's post. I keep thinking about how I asked you to be polite for them." "You were doing what we were taught," I said. "We were told that polite women hold the walls up." She nodded and pressed her palms together. I asked Lydia why she stayed quiet. She said she felt trapped between shame and spectacle. She said Ethan spoke for her before she could breathe. "That sounds right," I said. "It is also not an excuse." "She knows," Marjorie said. I heard it in her voice. We carried our cups to the table. Marjorie opened her phone and scrolled the family thread. Some cousins had shifted tone. A few offered apologies that avoided saying the word. She placed the phone face down. "I cannot fix them," she said. "I can only fix myself." "You do not have to perform repentance," I said. "You only have to choose differently going forward." Marjorie swallowed. "Sister, I was wrong," she repeated, as if saying it aloud might change the shape of her mouth. "I wanted quiet more than I wanted your dignity safe. I am sorry." I let the apology rest a moment, honored like a guest. Then I answered in the tone I wished our mother had used with us. "Silence is also a choice. What you choose is up to you." She breathed out, almost a laugh, almost a sob. "You always were the bravest," she said. "I am practicing," I answered. "Courage is a muscle. It learns by repetition." We peeled oranges and set the spirals of rind on a plate. The room smelled bright. Marjorie told me she had called Ethan's mother and said no more calls would be accepted. She had told the thread to stop asking me to apologize. She looked younger for having done it, as if a decade of weather had lifted from her face. "I am not asking you to pick sides," I said. "I am asking you to prefer truth." "I do," she said. "I prefer it because I am tired of ironing lies flat." We carried our tea to the window. Across the street, a girl skipped rope. Her mother counted time by clapping. "Do you think Lydia will leave him?" Marjorie asked. "I think Lydia will decide when the cost becomes undeniable," I said. "She might need time. I will not hurry her. I will not fund the waiting." "I will sit with you while you wait," she said. "That is a new tradition," I said. "I like it better than silence." We laughed gently. The sound felt like a blanket spread on grass. Marjorie gathered the orange peels into a bowl and rinsed the cups. She dried them carefully, as if drying could be an act of reverence. At the door she paused. "I will text the family," she said. "I will say I was wrong and that you were right to draw a line." "Say only what is true for you," I said. "No banners, no slogans." She smiled. "Then I will write this. She drew a boundary, and I respect it. From now on, I will not ask her to trade dignity for peace." She hugged me. Our family does not practice that often, but grief had made us bilingual. When she stepped into the hall, my phone buzzed again. It was her message to the thread. She had included one more line. "I am choosing silence where gossip lives and voice where truth needs company." I stood at the window until her car turned the corner. The room felt rebalanced. Not perfect, not finished, simply honest. I touched the hairpin and set the ledger aside. Peace, I realized, is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of respect. For the first time in a long season, my home held both. I closed the window halfway, brewed fresh tea, and let quiet settle. This time it felt earned, chosen, and large enough to hold us. My morning began with a square of light sliding across the floor. After Marjorie left, I washed the cups and set the orange peels to dry. The room smelled bright, like something forgiven. I fastened the mother-of-pearl hairpin in my hair and slipped the ledger into my purse. Not because I needed it, but because the woman I had been deserved a seat beside the woman I was becoming. I locked the door and walked to the community center, 6 blocks of maple shade and steady breath. I had passed that building for years, promising myself I would go inside when life made room. Today I made the room. The receptionist looked up, smiling like someone trained to notice tired people. She pointed me to a long table with forms, pencils, and a wedge of sun warming the stack. I chose beginning drawing, evening session, sliding scale. The first line asked for a name. I wrote Sylvia Carter, letters clear enough for whoever would read them. The second line asked why I wanted the class. I wrote, because I once set aside a degree to raise a child, and now I choose to raise myself. I sat at a metal chair that rocked slightly, then smoothed the paper with my palm. Address, emergency contact, fee. My breathing leveled. In, pause, out. The room smelled faintly of charcoal and hand soap, a good mixture for starting again. A door opened to the studio. A man in a mechanic's jacket brushed black dust from his knuckles. A teen kept her hood up. A grandmother lined pencils from dark to light. The instructor, paint under her nails, nodded as if we had already met in a kinder season. I read the signature line and thought of other lines I had signed. Withdrawal slips, permission slips, cancellations, contracts that trusted me more than the people they benefited. My hand did not shake. I set the pen down and signed with a steadiness that felt like returning a key to its rightful owner. I dated it. The numbers looked like blue windows on a new house. The receptionist asked about installments. I shook my head. The fee was small. The meaning was large. I slid my card across the counter like a boat leaving a safe harbor. In my mind, the old line rose, the spine of my new life. If I am not welcome, neither is my money. Today I reversed it. Where I am welcome, my money may work beside me. She handed me a receipt and a small schedule. Tuesday nights, Studio 3. Bring an eraser and courage. On my way out, I paused at the bulletin board. Flyers promised quilting circles, tax help, grief groups, a pantry schedule. A Polaroid showed last month's show. A kettle, a shoe, a wrinkled hand holding a coin. Ordinary objects, drawn with ordinary tenderness. I loved the honesty of it. Outside, wind pressed the maples into gentle applause. I walked home slowly, letting color come forward. A red bicycle leaning on a fence, a mailbox painted with suns, a chalk galaxy spinning across the sidewalk. My steps felt lighter than the air. It was not pride, it was permission. In the kitchen, I cleared a corner of the table and set down a fresh sketch pad. 3 pencils waited. One sharp, one dull, one trustworthy. I opened the window an inch and let the afternoon breeze move through. I stood there, rehearsing the posture of a life that does not apologize for its weight. When I sat, the chair welcomed me like an old companion. I wrote my name on the inside cover and drew a small square. I shaded from light to dark. The paper accepted the tones without hurry. My breath followed my wrist, steady in, gentle out. I whispered a promise. I will not trade visibility for approval. I will not fund the erasure of my own name. I will spend my money, my minutes, and my marrow where welcome opens the door. Late sun reached across the table and warmed my fingers. A gull cried beyond the roofs. A bus sighed. A neighbor's radio hummed a Motown chorus. I closed my eyes and listened, then opened them to the page. The square looked simple and sincere. So did I. I pressed my palm to the paper, felt the warmth move back into my skin, and knew this was how beginning feels. Quiet, present, and entirely mine. Later, I pinned the class schedule to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a boat, Robert carved from scrap pine. Tuesday, 6 to 8, Studio 3. I circled the date in blue and underlined it once. The magnet held. I stood in the kitchen and practiced saying yes. Yes to learning. Yes to being seen. Yes to spending what I earn in rooms that receive me with respect. The old rule remains my guardrail. If I am not welcome, neither is my money. The corollary is new. Where I belong, I will show up fully. Night settled kindly. I washed the cup, set the hairpin on the sill, and opened the sketchpad 1, last time. I drew a line across the page and let it become horizon. Above it, space for weather and light. Below it, room for roots. I turned off the lamp and kept the horizon inside me tonight. Evening folded across the apartment like a soft shawl. I turned on the kettle and set a teacup on the counter. Steam rose in silver threads. I felt my breath follow its climb, steady and warm. I pinned the mother of pearl hairpin into my gray hair, the clasp clicking with a small, faithful sound. In the mirror above the sink, I studied the woman looking back. Lined, yes. Tired sometimes, but unhidden. I smiled at her, not as a performance, but as recognition. I carried the cup to the table and opened the window a hand's width. The ocean salt reached me from several streets away. The breeze smelled like night jasmine and sea stone. Lights pricked alive in neighboring windows. A child laughed. Somewhere a trumpet tried 3 notes and quit. I placed the expense ledger on the shelf and left the sketchbook on the table. Today's square of shading lay like a quiet horizon. I cupped the tea in both hands and thanked the room for holding me. I thought of Lydia, in storms when she was small, in a white dress yesterday, in a doorway today, torn between voices. I thought of Ethan's posture at the threshold and Marjorie's oranges on my counter. I thought of Robert's ring sold for rent and the scholarship clause that now carried his name forward. In that inventory, I felt no triumph, only order. My life had been set back in the drawer where it belonged. I stepped to the mirror once more, touched the hairpin, and whispered to the daughter who lives both across town and inside my chest. My girl, I taught you that love is not endurance. Today, I learned the lesson again. The words landed without fire or frost. They simply fit. I did not promise reconciliation. I promised a door that would open to respect and close to contempt. That is the house I keep now. I turned the cup, watched the chamomile reflect the kitchen light, and listened to the city breathe through its evening ribs. My phone, face down near the dish rack, stayed quiet by design. Silence, once a costume I wore to please others, had become a room I furnished to serve the truth. I understood that forgiveness can walk in one day, but it will not be bribed. It will knock when the foundation is safe. On the refrigerator, the class schedule held steady under the carved boat magnet. Tuesday, 6 to 8, Studio 3. The words looked like coordinates on a map I had hidden under dishes for decades. A fresh pencil waited beside the sketchbook. I had given so much of my life to making other rooms beautiful. Now this one asked to be mine. I opened the window wider. Night air moved across the curtains. The fabric lifted, a slow breath in, a slow breath out. Far off, the sea kept its pace. I remembered my old line, first spoken in a parking lot, with my hands still shaking. If I am not welcome, neither is my money. It had sounded like defense that night. Now it sounded like wisdom. It carried me safely to the shore of a different life and asked nothing in return but honesty. I washed the cup, dried it with a towel that still smells faintly of lemon, and set it upside down to cool. The mirror held my smile steady. I slid the hairpin free and fastened it again, a ceremony as small as a heartbeat. I turned toward the window and let the air touch my face fully. I felt every mile of the years behind me settle into usefulness. Before we say goodbye, I would love to know where you are watching from. Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Tell us in the comments. We read every note with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not only to hear more stories like this, but to join a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. Remember this truth. Sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care, and I will see you in the next story. I walked to the window latch and lifted it. The pane rose with a soft slide, and the sea breeze came in, cool, salted, alive. It moved across my hair and the sketchbook's waiting page. It rang the teaspoon against the saucer with a single clear note. From the street, a bus sighed. From a rooftop, a wind chime answered. Inside, the future sat down at my table and asked nothing but honesty. I nodded. I opened the window wider. The room filled with the sound of being alive. I stood there and let it find me. No audience, no defense, no script. Only air and a life, and a woman who finally knew where she belonged. Before the night settled, I whispered a lesson to myself. Love makes room. It does not erase. If you were in my place, would you choose forgiveness, or would you choose to stand up? Share your truth. I will be here, listening.